Eagles coming to town here in Cincinnati. A lot of Eagles fans here. A lot of Eagles fans.
Were there?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Just flooding the streets.
I think I did see a few of them in the street walking over.
Disrespectful. Yeah. You got to get the dub at that point. You can't let them take over your city.
Good fan bases travel well.
They do, and Eagles fans travel extremely well. Eagles win this game 37-17. I don't know. You correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was closer than the final score indicated, like a 20-point game. I felt like it was a lot closer than that, but obviously it ran away from the Bengals there at the end. Let's take a look at the top 5 graded players for the Philadelphia Eagles, the winners in this one. Linebacker Zach Baun with an elite 91.3, and then fellow linebacker Nakobe Dean with a 90.7. They've been talking about the Eagles need to draft linebackers for like 3 straight years.
Look at all the Georgia Bulldogs there.
They're telling us to suck it.
Man.
Defense tackle Jalen Carter an 89.8. Edge rusher Nolan Smith on there. You're right, just Georgia Bulldogs everywhere, basically. 83.5. And then the wide receiver Devontae Smith with an 81.1 to round out the top 5. Jalen Hurts in this one. Really good game from Jalen Hurts. I'll get to him in a second. 89.7. On the Cincinnati Bengals side of things, defensive tackle B.J. Hill was the top graded player with an 85.2. Tight end Mike Gesicki, tight end day, 81.9. That's a theme you're going to see throughout this entire show. Edge rusher Trey Hendrickson with an 80.8. Cornerback Mike Hilton with a 79.4. Edge rusher Sam Hubbard a 79.0. And then Joe Burrow in this one, still impressive. No T. Higgins, but still impressive in this one, 86.6. Stat told the story, Dalton. What do we got?
Yeah, so obviously it's not about Burrow because Burrow just pretty much comes out and plays well every week, but it's the fact that T. Higgins did not play. It's that simple, and you look at them in 5 games with T. Higgins, their offensive grade as a team is 77.1, and they're 3-2. All right, 3 games without him, that goes all the way down to 63.6, and they've lost all 3 of those games. This team is too thin on the outside.
Wide receiver wins is a real stat.
Yeah, it is now because T. Higgins' record is pretty good. It's just, and then you have Jamar Chase. Okay, now you can focus more on him and do some different things without Higgins as that second threat. He only had 54 yards, did score a touchdown, but in this game they would have needed 100 at minimum, if not 150 from Chase to win this ball game. All of a sudden, you look at them without Higgins, and they're built just like, honestly, the Dallas Cowboys, where it's just CeeDee Lamb and everybody else just kind of clawing their way through. And Mike Gesicki actually led them in receiving yards in this game. So not ideal. When Higgins was announced out, this became a really bad spot for the Bengals because it's just one of the few injuries on their team they can't afford, right? It's just not the same offense. I honestly think the Bengals offense has the same exact problem as the Jets and the Cowboys. There's just not enough creativity to make up for a relatively short group of weapons. I know the Jets have more now with Adams, but you're seeing, especially with like say the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb, now it's, if you look at the Bengals team, without Higgins as that second guy, it's Jamar Chase, and it's just scratching and clawing for first downs, and it just doesn't work like that. This team is built on Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, and if any of the 3 of them are out, it's not the same, and the numbers show that. It's nowhere near the same, and if they don't get him back next week, they're going to be in dire straits because they can't really function without any one of those 3 guys.
Yeah, I was surprised because I also looked at some of their rushing statistics, and they're not good. I mean, Chase Brown, 2.7 yards per carry. Zach Moss, 2.5 yards per carry. That's nowhere near what you want. The Bengals weren't bad on third down overall as a team, 10 for 13 in this game for 77%, but specifically, they only gained 3 of those first downs when rushing the football. And I think that's just where the Eagles were so much more in control of this game. Eagles had 13 rushes for a first down, and they were just able to play their game and their identity. Stat that told the story. I want to give some props to Jalen Hurts because we've been critics of Jalen Hurts here on the show. I certainly have, and so if I can critique a player when he doesn't play well, I better be able to praise a player when he plays well. And this was Jalen Hurts' best game of the season, passing and rushing. 80.5 passing grade this season was the single game high for him in 2024. He had an 89.5 adjusted completion percentage, 83.7 rushing grade as well, which was the second highest single game grade that he had as a rusher this season. And he had 7 first downs rushing. I mean, he had more than half of this team's first downs on the ground. He was the man in this game. They had the offense completely built around him, and not that it was only him when I say that, but when he is able to play as efficient as he was able to play against the Bengals, that's when you can see this Eagles offense score 30 on you, and that's what they were able to do. And it was the best version of this Philly offense that we have seen yet, and Jalen Hurts was the reason why. So again, I've been a critic of him throughout the first half of the season, especially when the season started. I felt like he did not look right. He was not playing well. As of late, and especially this past game against the Bengals, giving him his kudos. I thought he played very, very well. Who's your most impressive in this game?
So it's not even actually, it's funny. It's not a Georgia Bulldog or any of those guys on that top 5 for me. I want to talk about a rookie that's making a difference, and that's Cooper DeJean at slot corner. Okay, and I think the smartest thing Howie Roseman did this offseason was draft both Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. DeJean was fighting some injuries earlier in the year. Now he's gotten in as basically the starting slot corner the last 3 games, and the impact that this had, I actually thought when they drafted both those guys that even though they drafted Mitchell first, that DeJean could have a bigger impact on this team. Last year, Trevor, they were dead last in slot coverage grade by a country mile. It was just known throughout the league. Throw the ball in the slot, and the Eagles have nothing to defend against it. DeJean did play a little bit of slot at Iowa. He was mostly an outside guy, but you could see he was capable of playing the slot. It was going to be a really good fit. Weeks 1 through 5 of this season, before he really started playing, they were 24th in slot coverage grade. The last 3 weeks, they are 3rd. And if this is a thing that gets patched up in the secondary with Quinyon still improving on the outside, you still have Darius Slay, Reed Blankenship, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson out back there on the back end at safety. Now you have a complete secondary because it was the one giant Achilles heel. They've struggled to defend the run, but at slot corner, it's just been a massive issue, especially last year, that if they fix it and they're well-rounded, he's a great tackler. He even got in some man-to-man situations with Jamar Chase and got beat a couple of times, but that's one of the best receivers in football, right? But he held his own. I think this is a guy, look, he had a 74.6 coverage grade in this game. He's got an 87.5 coverage grade over these 3 weeks that he's played a lot. He's a guy, and you can see when you watch him on tape, he's a really smart football player. You can see him when he's traveling in motion or something like that, where he's calling out the reads, he's calling out switches and things behind him for the secondary. And there's some other young players in the secondary, especially him and Quinyon, where he just knows what's going on out there. I think his football IQ is ahead of his years, and he's also a really fundamentally sound player. This is a guy who makes their team a lot better, and you can see it in action in their secondary right now.
Used my ears. CB2 in the draft, top 10 player in the draft. I love Cooper DeJean. I felt like he could be a impact player in the secondary. And when the Eagles went back-to-back corners, I was a little shocked, but it makes a lot of sense because I think it's really rounding out their defense. So is Nakobe Dean coming to form. Obviously, we saw him number 2 on the list as the second highest graded player that we had for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. 9 combined tackles in this one, 7 solo tackles for Nakobe Dean, 91.0 pass rush grade, and a 90.0 run defense grade. I mean, when Georgia was winning their national championships and Nakobe Dean was at the center of that defense, I mean, he was defensive player of the year.
He was the leader too.
He was unbelievable. He was the fire. He was the heart and soul. He was the communicator. He was the tone setter. He was everything. So I was really hoping that he was going to be able to really succeed at the NFL level. And I think he was dealing with some injuries during his first couple of years. I think it was a shoulder injury that ended up being a reason why, he was drafted a lot later than what we thought he was going to be drafted as a third-round pick. And I felt like he could have been a top 50 pick again for how well he played at Georgia. A little bit undersized. And then when you throw in, he's got an injury that you might have to worry about. And again, like a shoulder injury, I believe it was a shoulder injury. Shoulder injuries are tough for linebackers because you hit a lot. That is your job, basically, to put pressure and pain on your shoulder all the time. And so it's tough to project a player like that, but it was great to see Nakobe Dean playing well. Most disappointing for me, Bengals offensive line. I think it had to be because when you look at them not running the ball well, they weren't really able to block well either. 47.2 overall blocking grade as a team in this one, 40.0 pass blocking grade as well. So the pass blocking grade wasn't great, but to me it was that run blocking. This team, we talk about protect Joe Burrow. Obviously, that's very important. They've got to be able to move the line of scrimmage. They have to be able to help this run game a lot better because the floor cannot, for as good as T. Higgins is, right? And when you draft star players, when you acquire star players, they're going to mean a lot for your team. When they don't play, obviously, it's going to be tough. But the floor cannot be as low as it is for the Bengals right now when one of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins doesn't play because you've got to be able to run the ball better. You've got to be able to control the game better, especially on the ground. That starts with their offensive line. So that is still a work in progress for this team. I'm still a little disappointed by that group. Who's the most disappointing for you before we move on?
For me, honestly, it's Zach Taylor. I just don't see I don't see a whole lot of creativity in this offense. And there was a specific sequence, I think it was either late in the third or early in the fourth quarter when the Bengals were still down 7, and it was a 3rd and 1. And, you have Joe Burrow. We talked about this at the end of the Ravens game when they chose to run the ball 3 times and then they missed the field goal. But, you had a 3rd and 1 here on a drive that you could have tied the game on. And they put a 6 offensive linemen and 2 tight ends out there and just Jamar Chase ISO'd out by himself. And they run the ball right down the pipe, right behind a motion, behind I believe, a rookie tight end, Eric All. And that gets stuffed. And then the 4th and 1 call, they throw a bubble to Chase behind the line of scrimmage that gets stopped. There's something about these short yardage situations right now with the Bengals, and I just think in general, again, with the Higgins injury, their offense just isn't all that creative. I think just like the Jets and the Cowboys, they're asking their quarterback to do way too much on a weekly basis to make up for, 1, a lack of talent at certain spots and a lack of depth, and 2, a lack of creativity. So they either need to add more to this offense or they're just going to be waiting out Higgins getting healthy and again, winning with the trifecta. But when they don't have that, there's just nothing else schematically that makes up for it.